All right, I think we'll get started. I'd like to thank you all for joining us for today's presentation, From Data to Insights. And this is a presentation of the Workday Adaptive Planning Solution in Action. My name is Terry Kearns. I'm a Senior Account Executive here with Revelwood. Joining me today is my colleague, Haley Elliott. She's on a Senior Pre-Sales Solution Consultant, and she'll be presenting the demonstration as we go forward. So a little bit about Workday and adaptive planning to start. For those of you who may not be familiar with Workday, Workday is a $6.5 billion publicly traded company in the software space, specializing in human capital management, financials. So they have a platform addressing different areas of the business, procurement, and they have been widely recognized as Fortune Future 50 #1 company, very high ratings from the analyst community, from the press, Forbes, in terms of most innovative companies, best workplaces to work. They acquired the solution that we're going to present to you today, adaptive planning, back in 2018. And today, adaptive planning has over 6,300 customers, and they get very high marks again from the analyst community, Gartner and what have you. And they've got some really interesting technology, which we're going to take you through today. So a little bit about the planning partner track record. For Revelwood, we are an accredited and a platinum partner for Workday Adaptive Planning. Award-winning. We were the partner of the year for Workday in 2022. Today we have over 150 Workday Adaptive Planning implementations that we've done over the last few years. Very extensive and true FP&A expertise across all industries. So, Revelwood's been in business for 27 years, delivering solutions into the Office of Finance. So adaptive planning is a perfect technology for us to partner with, delivering on our promise and really focused on customer satisfaction, get very high ratings for that. So I mentioned 6,300 adaptive planning customers. What's interesting, I think, about that is that those customers fall in a variety of different vertical industries. Some logos on this slide that you recognize, some large companies, but many very small companies who've grown with adaptive planning, moving from Excel into a purpose-built solution, adaptive. And the great thing about adaptive planning is that it can really scale with companies as their businesses grow, as they acquire different companies, as they expand. It can scale up, and we like to say that adaptive is really the only solution that those companies will ever have to invest in. So we're going to talk today about planning in the Office of Finance, but what's great about adaptive planning is that it really touches on all areas of the business, from HR, operations, right over to sales and marketing, the variety of different areas where adaptive can add value. And we've got different case studies that are available on our website as well as the Workday website that touch on the different parts of the business. And ultimately, the vision, as we work with customers, is they'll typically start in one area, but they want to expand into other areas, leveraging the data that's common to all different departments, and really build a comprehensive planning strategy for the business. So when we talk about adaptive planning, the term that's used is elastic hypercube technology, which is kind of a fancy way of saying it's got some pretty cool IP. It's intelligent, and it because it's a cloud-based solution, and adaptive is the original cloud-based solution in the marketplace. It's very extensible. So the solution knows how to handle data as data scales. And it's also extremely flexible. So one of the things in the planning process that's really important to companies is modeling, right? You've got different types of models in the different areas of the business. The flexibility with which you model is extremely important to help companies deliver solutions quickly and get value, get that return on investment, faster. So when we talk about scalability and flexibility, we look at different dimensions and scenarios. But what really it comes down to is ease of use, right? So ease of use in terms of delivering a solution, getting it implemented, ease of use in terms of having users adopt the technology. At the end of the day, if users aren't using a solution, the company's not getting the value out of that. And this is one of the areas that adaptive planning gets very, very high marks in, is ease of use, ease of deployment, and ultimately a very high return on investment for that reason. I'm going to pass the baton to Haley.
Perfect. Thanks, Terry, and welcome everybody. Like Terry mentioned, my name is Haley Elliott. I'm our Senior Pre-Sales Solutions Consultant. Been working with Adaptive for just over 3 years now and actually started on implementation. That really just means if you have any questions at all, anything that I'm not covering that you want to go into more detail on, feel free to pop those in the Q&A box, and I will try to get to as many questions as I can. If it's going to require something a little bit more detailed or something like that, we can always follow up. So please feel free to ask questions. But what you're seeing on the screen is our general game plan for today. We're going to start off with basics, so versions, levels, things that you're going to see on basically every screen in Adaptive. We'll talk a little bit about integration. From there, we'll walk through our active dashboards and what makes dashboarding different in Adaptive. We'll touch on the financial statements. We are going to focus on the P&L, but we do typically build out a full 3 financial statement model when we implement Adaptive, so your cash flow and balance sheet too. The main model we'll focus on is workforce planning, and then we'll wrap up on 2 other types of reporting in Adaptive, our ad hoc in-browser interface and our Office Connect plugin, which is going to connect all your data in Adaptive, those actuals, your budget data, into the Microsoft Office suite, so Excel, PowerPoint, and Word. So lots to cover, so I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. Y'all should be seeing Adaptive now. 2 things before we get started. Just note that I'm going to be in an admin account for this entire demonstration, which means I'm going to be able to see every single report, data point, sheet, every part of the organizational structure. Just know that you can restrict this on a user-by-user basis. So you can make it to where people only see what's relevant to them when they come into the solution. And then part 2 to that is just that I can come into any of these any homepage and go ahead and have that also customized on an end user by end user basis. So if you wanted to say, have someone come in and look at a dashboard like we're seeing here, great. But you could also customize this to just be a working screen report, something along those lines. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and take us into basics. 2 things you'll see on essentially every screen are levels and versions. So levels are going to be your organizational structure. So think departments, cost centers, regions, really whatever you'd like your organizational structure to be. Couple things on the level structure. This is going to be your first line of security in Adaptive. So typically what you'll do is assign an end user to a level or a group of levels that they're responsible for budgeting for. And then every single dashboard, report, and working screen is going to be automatically filtered to their data set. So that's important for 2 reasons. One is obviously security. People shouldn't be able to come in and see data that you don't want them to, or that's not applicable to their department. And 2, the level structure will make all of your data consolidation, so that data aggregation and rolling up, automatic. So as soon as I make changes as the manager of Sales North, that rolls up my level structure instead of me having to copy and paste between 20 or 30 different Excel templates. Super flexible structure too, if you ever decide that you'd like to acquire a new company or do a reorg. All of our organizational elements are click and drag or plus button to add new ones. So pretty quick to make any of those adjustments. And then the other item that I mentioned was versions. So this is really where you'll manage the different iterations of your budget instead of having budget V1, budget V1 in progress, budget V1 final. You can go ahead and have all of those right here along with a rolling forecast. So if you want to start getting into a 3+9, 4+8, that kind of thing, this is also where you'll manage that. You get an unlimited amount of data in Adaptive, so you can load in and scale with the platform as much as your company needs to. And last thing I'll say on versions is just you'll notice that there's a little lock icon at the bottom right-hand corner of several of these versions. That means they're locked versions, probably some sort of board-approved budget, something like that, that you don't want end users to be able to make changes to that data, but you still want them to be able to pull it into reports or replicate it for another iteration of the forecast. Okay, so that's kind of the two pieces you're going to see on every screen. In terms of how we start to get some of the data we're looking at into the system, our integration platform is directly in Adaptive, so we don't use any sort of third-party tool. You can access your entire planning, reporting, and analytics process through the single navigation pane, including integration. So kind of two different ways to get data into Adaptive outside of just keying it in directly to Sheets. The first is automated integration. So Adaptive is data agnostic, which just means we can connect to literally any source system. So your NetSuites, your Salesforces, your JD Edwards, all of that. And we can set up an automated data feed for your GL balances, transactions, personnel data, or any operational metrics you might want to bring over. How this works is we'll set up a direct connection to whatever source system you all are working with, as many of them as you would like, and set up tasks to automate those data loads. So we can have those tasks run nightly, hourly, every 15 minutes. Maybe you change them during month-end close. But the idea is to really make sure you do not have to do any manual work when getting your actuals refreshed. You can also always come into those tasks and click a run button to run your integrations on demand. So it truly is meant to be owned by finance. There's not a coding process to kick off integration, and it takes maybe a minute or two to run. The other option here is just manual data import. So if there's something you load less frequently, like your personnel roster, you're probably just updating that once a week, once a month from a Paylocity or a Paycom, something like that. You can grab an Excel file from one of those systems, tell Adaptive what version and sheet you're trying to load into, and it'll actually generate a template for you to copy and paste your data into, and then you can import it right into the system. So super flexible options for getting data into Adaptive. If you have questions about specific systems, we can absolutely talk about them, but the answer is probably yes, we can integrate with it. And if anyone's ever confused, it's their first time trying to run an integration or load data or build a dashboard, they can click this little question mark, and it's a context-dependent knowledge base that guesses what you need help with. So I'm trying to import here. It recognizes that and gives me a step-by-step guide on exactly how to fulfill that task. Other option for help is just our 24/7, 365 support through Workday, which is included with all of our subscriptions. That's kind of a crash course in data integration. Like I mentioned, we can absolutely follow up on that. But for now, we're going to go ahead and get into the modeling and visualization pieces in Adaptive. So we're going to start in our active dashboards. Dashboards in Adaptive are called active dashboards for a couple of reasons. The first is that you can click on any dial, any graph or KPI and drill into where that data is coming from. So I'm going to have two options here. One is a dimensional drill down where I can say, hey, let me look at this by my different customers. Give me a customer breakdown of my revenue. What products are they purchasing? Something along those lines, and whatever order you'd like to drill down in. Those paths are automatically generated. So as soon as I add a new dimension on my revenue model, maybe a year after I implemented Adaptive, it's going to pop up here in this list. I don't need to manually update my reports. Other option here is to explore data. And so this is going to open up a cell explorer that we'll see a couple times today, but it's going to give me information like the levels that are contributing to my revenue, if there's any dimension associated with it. But most importantly, it's going to give me access to an audit trail that will tell me who's been making changes to that data, when they made the change, and what the change was. It's a really great way to bring more people into the budgeting system, but still be able to track the changes they're making. And then I can also follow this all the way through to the planning model that's generating that number. So this is just kind of a visual representation of our models and visuals being on the same database. You don't have to go hunting through cells or multiple different softwares to find how all of this is connected. Now, the other reason these are called active is because you can use them as part of the budgeting process or as part of kind of like a what if scenario. So what you're going to see down here at the bottom is that product revenue sheet that I just briefly had pulled up. And so what I can do here is come down to one of my sales departments. And just note too, this is only one way to model revenue in Adaptive. There are so many different directions we could go here. But for now, if I just want to make a quick change, hey, I think we're actually going to sell 10% higher of this specific product line. What would happen to our kind of top line numbers if we did that? I'll make that adjustment real quick, save, and you're going to see a little ... refresh over all of these dials. That bottom number just changed from 57 to 62. And that's really just highlighting that as you're maybe in a meeting or just finalizing the budget and you want to see what happens if I change this driver or average sales price or commission rates for our sales reps, something like that. You can see all of those changes reflected live, both in a dashboard or on your report. So everything's connected in real time. One other use for dashboards is in the actual budgeting process. So since you can pop those sheets onto dashboards, maybe you set up a step-by-step 1, 2, 3 for people to just sign in and click through tabs and kind of do their budgeting process that way. Last thing I'll cover on dashboards is probably top of everyone's mind. Looks cool, how do I build it? Pretty straightforward. If you come in to edit, all of our reporting interfaces are click and drag. So you can just say, hey, I want a new KPI. We have a bunch of different options here. And all you really need to tell Adaptive is what account you want to display on that graph. So yes, you have access to all of your financial data, but you'll also have access to any other data point in the entire system. They're not disparate databases. I could put capital planning on here, inventory, workforce, metric accounts, something like that. So lots of flexibility with how you choose to display your data. So it's a crash course in dashboards. From here, we're going to start to dig in a little bit more to the sheets that generate these numbers. So sheets are pretty similar to what a lot of you probably work with now in Excel in terms of just your keying in numbers, calculations are running. And then we have assumptions, which are where we house global drivers. So think your workforce, tax rates, or merit increases, your freight assumptions, materials, things like that. You have one single place that you're able to actually manage those global drivers. And as you make updates to them, those changes will flow through to your sheets. But we're going to focus on a couple of these sheets, starting in the P&L. A couple of things you're going to notice right when this comes up. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate to one of my US departments. Our green numbers and black numbers. So our green numbers on the left here are our actuals. I'm just showing a fiscal year here, but I could always come back and open this up into months, have 10 years of actuals in this version, whatever is going to be most useful for you. And then black numbers are my budget data. The budget's either manually keyed in, so just the blank white cells, calculated, which is indicated by these blue triangles, or based off of a more detailed sheet, which we call a supporting schedule. And we'll take a look at all three. So the first one, like I mentioned, you can always come in and manually key in a number. So let's say operating expenses. I know for new hires, we're going to budget $15,000 this year. If you key that in, Adaptive is going to give you a bunch of out-of-the-box ways to break that back. So a lot of times in Excel, we default to just peanut butter spreading stuff, which isn't really that accurate. Adaptive lets you actually say, hey, look at the actuals I already have integrated from last year. and tell me when I'm actually expecting to spend that cash. Option 2 that I mentioned were calculations. So again, blue triangle means it's a calculated field. And you can see our calculations are not scary. You don't have to learn another coding language or something like that. It's very similar to Excel syntax, similar operators, all of that. The main difference is that instead of using cells and formulas, so B2 times C 6,000, we're just using accounts, so kind of like named ranges. So I can look at the formula and see, hey, I'm taking a telephone per head assumption and multiplying that by the number of FTEs in this specific department. Okay. If you ever want to write something more complicated, because I know that's a pretty simple formula, we also have a point and click formula assistant for your if statements and all of that. That's, again, pretty similar to Excel syntax. Okay. We are going to go in. We just got a question on kind of budgeting by person, budgeting by customer. Yes, we're actually going to drill into a couple of those supporting schedules next, but you can budget for these line items at any level of detail you would like. And we'll see some examples in just a moment of that. The last thing I wanted to say, really, just while we're on the high level P&L, is you can collaborate in this platform. So you'll see red carets on some of these cells. That means someone has just right-clicked, added a note to explain why. And that will flow through to any report that you pull with that account on it. And we'll see what that looks like too. And as I've made these changes and saved them, as soon as I save them, that's also going to roll up the level structure. So lots of synergy in here, making sure we're always in sync with the changes that are being made. Now, to the point of the question that was just asked, let's dig into kind of some more of the supporting schedules that are generating this number, or some of these line items. So what I can actually do on something like salary and wages is come in and explore cell and drill through to the individual schedule that's supporting this. One thing to note is that we do take personnel security very seriously in Adaptive. There's a salary detail permission so that if someone doesn't actually have that access, they will not even see the bottom half of this cell explorer. They'll just see the total department's employee burden. So there's a lot of security configuration you can do here. But for now, let's look at the workforce planning schedule. So this is one example of how you might start to plan for your personnel. This is called a model sheet. It's really just a sheet where you can drag whatever columns you'd like to plan with. So we use this for CRM data if you do want to start planning by account, by customer, by sales rep. You can use this for prepaids, inventory, CapEx, just to give you an idea of exactly how flexible these sheets are. And that's true for every view I'm showing. You are not locked into the fields that I'm showing here. This is just a demo instance. In terms of functionality here, you'll notice we have some drop downs. Those are dimensions referring to my assumption sheets. So I have some state tax assumptions. I have some global personnel assumptions that as I change those drivers, it'll go ahead and update for all of these individuals. You'll also notice that we have 2 lines for Will here. He's being allocated 60/40 across 2 different departments. You can do that type of allocation across any dimension you'd like in the system, multiple dimensions, and it'll go ahead and split out his employee burden automatically across those levels. Now, all calculations here happen in the back end. So if I want to take a peek at Melanie's employee burden, I can explore row details and see all of her calculations happening back here. Again, totally configurable. You're not married to these calculations. But the one thing I do want to call out is just these 2 kind of tax line items. Adaptive will actually track against maximums that you've set for things like FICA, FUTA, SUI, Social Security, all of that. And once an individual hits that maximum, it'll cut off the calculation until the next fiscal year. And no worries if you're not a January through December fiscal year, totally fine. We'll configure the calendar for you. So just a nice kind of tidbit of built-in functionality that comes with Adaptive as well. And lastly, cool thing, once you kind of import your employee roster or your CRM data into a sheet like this, you can come in and make changes. So I can say, hey, I would like to hire another account executive. We want to change this new hire date and see what happens, something along those lines. And as you save these changes, that'll automatically flow through to the P&L as well. So once you bring data in, you can build on top of it. This is meant to be an active budgeting tool. So that's just a light touch on personnel planning. If you'd like to go into more detail on like talent management or role-based planning, anything like that, you can mix and match different planning styles in Adaptive quite easily. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and take us into the other two types of reporting in Adaptive. Do note though, if y'all ever want to kind of explore other models we have available, we can absolutely dig into that at a later time. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and take us into web reports. So we'll take a look at one for functionality and then walk through a couple of examples. Web reports in Adaptive are super useful for ad hoc reporting, checking in on budget versus actuals, or you can put these as kind of like a last step in a process. So nice little checklist for people to follow during the budgeting process, just as a checkpoint for them to see if they're tracking against last year's actuals or what they budgeted for last year. If they're not, they can always come in, add notes so that any kind of final reviewer can review their notes directly on the report. Speaking of notes, those little red carrots from the P&L that I mentioned all aggregate down here. So again, I don't have to go department by department hunting for everyone's explanations. You still have the option to drill down into any of these numbers, just like we did on the dashboard. I can say, hey, that is an absolute wild variance. Don't like that. We're going to drill into actuals and actually be able to drill all the way back into transactional detail without needing to go back into our ERP. So this will be an automated integration in most cases. You can add any fields you'd like here. So vendor, invoice ID, product, something along those lines. We can add those columns here as well. But this is really nice for especially non-kind of power users, that kind of thing, who might not be as comfortable going into an ERP, but will be perfectly fine clicking through just a couple of cells to be able to look at the transactions behind their actuals. One other thing you can do on these reports is pivot them. So if I click on an account, I will have that same dimensional drill down where I can maybe look at my salary and wages by department, something like that. I could translate this into a different currency with the native FX rates and Adaptive. So lots of different ways to slice and dice this data. You can download these as Excel and PDF as well to distribute, but you'll get up to 1,000 view-only users with your license or with your subscription. So you can also just have people come in and look at their own reports. It's meant to be very self-service. In terms of how these are built out, they are all customized to customers' requests. So to the question that was just asked, we'll typically build out some reports for you during implementation based on what you currently use, and then train you on how to build reports as well. So this is the interface that you'll get used to, and it's all click and drag. So again, you don't need MDX coding or anything like that. I just have access to all of my adaptive elements over here on the left. And so if I wanted to dimensionalize this by customer, I could drag that on. Whatever dimensions are in your instance or accounts, you can just easily click and drag onto a report like this. Again, meant to be very self-service. This is probably one of the most unique parts of Adaptive, is just giving people the ability to spin up these dynamic reports in a couple of minutes or less. As one other example, this is kind of a favorite of the C-suite, is the ability to stack our income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow on top of each other. I've got actuals from last year, 2 iterations of my current budget, some variance metrics where there are differences, but I've also mixed in some financial metrics, so cash ratio, current ratio, debt ratio, that kind of thing. And again, all of these are configured to your reporting needs. So the one other thing that I did want to cover was Office Connect. So Office Connect is our plugin to Microsoft Office 365, like I mentioned, which just means that all of that data we kind of started poking into in Adaptive, your actuals, your plan data, can be connected in real time to Excel, PowerPoint, and Word. So we'll walk through functionality real quick. If I highlight linked cells, blue cells are linked directly to Adaptive. So to prove that out, if I explore cell, this will open up a cell explorer and take me back into Adaptive. Now, if you're drilling down, it will prompt you to sign in just to make sure you have permission to drill into more detail on this data. Green cells are dynamic labels that'll update as you refresh this. So cool thing about this is if you already have a board presentation you like to use, you don't need to recreate it. We can use the adaptive elements over here on the left, which are pretty much the same ones from the web reporting interface, and just click and drag them on top of an existing report like this. So I'll go ahead and grab some of these OpEx accounts and drag them over, and you'll see these cells highlight blue, which again means they're now connected to Adaptive. Only other thing I need to do to populate that data is refresh, but while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and grab next month's report. So we're looking at February. I want March's report because we're about to roll into that board meeting. I can come into workbook properties up here, roll my report date forward a month. Okay, I'll hit refresh and you'll see two things happen. All of that data is going to now be populated. And I now have a trailing 6 from March instead of February, my year-to-date updated, and all of my Excel formatting was also maintained. So Office Connect is really nice for those reports that you need to be more formatted, like your board presentations. Now, if you wanted to split this out across different departments, different product lines, different regions, you can come up to repeating reports. Just tell Adaptive, how do you want to break this report down? I'm going to say levels because, again, that's my organizational structure. I'll pick some countries in this case. And Adaptive is going to create 3 new tabs at the bottom in just a couple of seconds. It's automatically splitting out that data for me in the same format for the UK, Canada, US, and my total company. And then lastly, if you ever want to get more detail on these line items, you can expand, see the underlying GL, and as you add new GL accounts, and those are refreshed and adaptive, they'll also appear on these reports next time you refresh them. So you don't need to manually keep all of your structural elements in sync. Adaptive will do that for you. But with that, that's everything that I had planned to cover at a high level today. So I can go ahead and pass it back to Terry to close us out.
Awesome, Haley. Thank you. So as always, we have a knowledge center with a lot of really good information. Please check it out at revelwood.com. Some really good tips and tricks and a variety of other sources there. So please feel free to check that out. Thanks again for joining us today. If you have questions, again, circle back. You can reach out directly to me at my email that's listed there. Also, we will be requesting follow-up meetings for your feedback and like to learn more about your interests. So you'll be hearing from a member of our team, and we look forward to chatting with you on those meetings. Thanks. Enjoy the rest of your day.